Welcome everyone to our virtual program, Conservation of a Wooded Watershed. I know that Barbara and Mark have been doing a lot of preparation for this, so it's going to be a good one. There's some really interesting pictures. If you want to if you have any questions, just enter them into the Q&A and we will address them at the end of the program. So I will hand it over to Laura Igo.
Thank you, Jen. And thank you all for joining us this evening, this very hot evening, I have to say. It's nice to be inside and cool. So this year, as many of you know, we are celebrating the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. But at the Michener, we are also celebrating the 100th year anniversary of the creation of Daniel Garber's Wooded Watershed, painted for Philadelphia's sesquicentennial celebration. And we wouldn't be able to experience in our galleries today without the work of conservators Mark Bockrath and Barbara Buckley. This evening, they will share the remarkable story behind the conservation of Garber's Wooded Watershed prior to its installation at the Michener in 1994. I'm going to provide some bios for introductions for both Barbara and Mark. So Barbara Buckley is Senior Director of Conservation and Chief Conservator of Paintings at the Barnes Foundation in Philadelphia. She founded Barbara A. Buckley and Associates Painting Conservation in 1987 after earning her MA from the Cooperstown Graduate Program in Art Conservation. She's held positions at the Inter-Museum Conservation Association in Ohio, the Indianapolis Museum of Art, and the Cleveland Museum of Art. And she has published on the materials and artist techniques of Henri Rousseau, Amedeo Modigliani, Paul Cézanne, and Pierre-Auguste Renoir and Horace Pippin. And of course, because the Zoom has started, my cat now wants to also be a part of it, so excuse his appearance. And Mark Bockrath is paintings conservator at Barbara A. Buckley and Associates, Painting Conservation. He holds an MS in art conservation from the Winterthur University of Delaware program, and previously worked in paintings conservation at the Inter-Museum Conservation Association, the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, and the Winterthur Museum. His research has focused on the painting techniques of Thomas Eakins, Horace Pippin, John Sloan, and the history of American picture frames. So I will turn it over now to Barbara and Mark. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Yeah, thank you for that nice introduction. Now the most challenging part of the evening will be for me to share the PowerPoint. It actually is telling me that it is disabled. There we go. No, that's because it's already open on my screen. Okay. Yeah. So Jen, it's telling me the host has disabled participant screen sharing. Okay.
You should be able to share it now.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Here we go.
Okay.
Can you see okay? Is it? Okay, thanks. Center mode. Okay. And that was the biggest challenge of the evening, hopefully. It is also, we have a thunderstorm in Westchester tonight, so we're hoping for the electricity to remain on. So good evening, everybody. Thank you again for joining us tonight. And Mark and I would like to thank the Michener Art Museum and Jen and Laura for all your help in preparing this lecture tonight. But tonight we're going to share the relocation and conservation story of Daniel Garber's A Wooded Watershed, created 100 years ago this month for the 1926 sesquicentennial exposition in Philadelphia. This is the story of a wooded watershed and its journey from and return to Bucks County, with stops along the way in Philadelphia, Mont Alto, and Westchester. So this image, taken in 1926, is the mural installed in the Pennsylvania building for a forestry display at the sesquicentennial. Daniel Garber painted the mural in just 6 weeks for the sesquicentennial celebration of the nation's 150th anniversary. For context, for those of you who are not familiar with the sesqui for short, the exposition opened on May 31st, 1926, and ran through the end of November of that year. It occupied a vast site in South Philadelphia, and for those of you who are familiar with Philly, it was bounded by 10th Street, Packer Avenue, 23rd Street, and the U.S. Navy Yard. The fair spanned more than 2,000 acres, including the Navy base, and featured 45 major buildings and about 250 pavilions, booths, and stands. Clearly, it was ambitious. The mural was commissioned by the state of Pennsylvania for the Forestry display in the Pennsylvania building. After the exposition closed, Garber's commissioned mural was transferred in 1927 to the Penn State Mont Alto campus, which was the state's premier forestry school. Decades later, after conservation treatment, the painting was transferred and installed at the Michener Art Museum, where it was unveiled in 1995. When we first encountered the painting at Mont Alto, it was installed in an auditorium above a raised stage, as you can see here. The stage was too narrow to accommodate the mural's full width, which was 22 feet when Garber painted it. And this, from the first discussions, raised the critical question both for us and for the Michener staff. Had the outer edges of the lunette been removed, or might they still exist, folded back and potentially repairable? We hoped that the outside edges had not been removed and were still extant, and that they were just folded back and repairable. There were no known documentation of the 1927 installation work at Mont Alto. So our second question was, how was the mural installed and secured to the backstage wall? When the team first arrived at Mont Alto, this was our first time seeing the mural in person. Our planning for the project was based upon discussions with Michener staff. Like any conservation treatment, before the deinstallation, we first completed preliminary documentation, including photography and a detailed condition map of the mural. In addition to our documentation, the Michener had also coordinated with a photographer and a videographer to document the process for a local TV program, Art Beat. So take a moment to note here that the mural was painted on a rectangular canvas and wasn't on a shaped canvas. The spandrels at the upper left and the upper right are part of the original canvas that had since been painted over with white paint, basically painting over an exposed area of canvas, a grounded canvas that wasn't painted by Garber. The fact that it was rectangular had not been fully appreciated until we were on site and examining the painting. To move a mural requires pre-planning and the gathering of a team. The team consisted of conservators, art handlers, and Michener Museum staff. We gathered at the Mont Alto campus in late spring after the school semester was finished to deinstall and move the painting over 2 days. Art handling was performed by Glenn Herron and by Artec's Art Services crew, along with Henry Hose from the Michener Art Museum. Bruce Katzeff and Judy Heyman, assistant director, were also on site to coordinate logistics. Mark and I were assisted during the deinstallation stage of the project by painting conservator Mary McGinn. And on the left, you can see, and actually in both images, Judy Heyman is at the center. On the left, you see Artec's staff and in the white sweaters, Mary Michener in the background. And on the right, it's Glenn Herron in the foreground with Judy, and then behind Henry Hose. In order to understand how the painting was installed, we began by removing the edge moldings. The moldings were nailed to the canvas to conceal the perimeter. Once the lower edge and the two vertical side moldings were removed, the edges of the painting became visible. The painting had been secured to the wall with 7-inch masonry nails, which anchored the stretcher to the wall at all 4 corners and were also centered along the top edge over those 2 upper spandrels. These had to be removed very carefully because they passed through the face of the painting and into the canvas and stretcher support. And here what you see is Mark and Mary removing nails that were used to attach the wood moldings that framed the upper curve of the painted design. Rather than completing this step while it was in situ on the wall, due to the angle and delicate nature of the removal, and this was also adjacent to the painted design, this was completed once the stretched canvas was disengaged from the stage wall. As the mural came away from the wall and the moldings removed, we could finally assess the condition of the painting and canvas more fully. Some detailed condition issues. In many ways, the condition of the mural was as to be expected for a painting of this age in a public space. The surface was very grimy. There were scratches to the paint surface. The canvas was buckled and slack on the stretcher support, and the canvas was punctured, causing holes and tears, some of which you can see here. Even though the mural was appreciated by staff and students at Mont Alto, it was not surprising to find damages to the painting. After all, it was installed as a backdrop on a working stage, and one can imagine that the damages were accidental and caused by ladders, tools, or props that may have been in use. So you can see, in addition to accidental damages, the molding itself caused holes in the face of the painting. And again, a few more condition issues, and the slide on the left is a gouge, a puncture through the canvas that Mark will talk about a little bit later too in the treatment section of the talk. So with the moldings removed, we were now able to assess the condition of the painting in more detail. And most importantly, the big question, were the original side edges of the canvas intact? Happily, the answer was yes. We discovered that the edges had in fact been folded around the stretcher for the Mont Alto installation and were still intact, although the tacking margins needed repair, as you can see here in this image. In spite of all it had endured, those sections were actually in pretty good condition. The images you see here were taken later in the treatment, but using them now because I think they more clearly answer the question that had been on everyone's mind from the moment that the mural had first been seen by Bruce Katzev. Ultimately, we were able to recover the full design exactly as Garber had intended. The arrows indicate where the moldings had covered the edge of the painted design and where the painting had been tacked to a smaller stretcher for the Mont Alto installation. And I also think of some of these images as before and afters of us. This was so many years ago. At this point, the painting was removed from its face up position on a horizontal support and laid face down on the padded auditorium floor, which had been cleared of the auditorium chairs for our work. We removed the stretcher and began the process of preparing the canvas for rolling safely for transport. So I'm going to step back a little. And this was, as we were examining the mural before deinstallation, we noted this hole at the lower right of the mural. The Mont Alto librarian, Marjorie Bluebow, relayed a story to us at the time that a custodian had been known to put out his cigarette butts through one of the holes over the years. And indeed, once the stretcher was removed, we found this pile of cigarette butts lodged behind the lower stretcher bar. Marjorie Bluebow retained the cigarettes for the archives at Mont Alto. So when the stretcher was removed, these are just a few details of the canvas. We began the process of flattening the worst creases so the canvas could be rolled safely for transport. And here, and actually in the image on the left is Marjorie, the archivist at Mont Alto, along with Mark and Mary. So at this stage, before we began, we vacuumed the reverse of the canvas to remove particulate grime. And as you can see on the right, Mary, we actually all participated in this, but what Mary's doing is ironing the tacking edges to reduce their crease using some heat and a bit of moisture. And a wood lathe tube with end supports had been made by Mark in our Westchester studio prior to our arrival in Mont Alto. And you can see what that looked like on the left. The end supports lifted the painting off the floor and prevented it from rolling and creasing the canvas and damaging it during transport. And actually, you'll see the supports in the next slide. After preparing the tube, we began the process of rolling the mural. The mural was rolled face out onto the padded wood lathe tube support. It was interleaved with glassine paper and finally wrapped with craft paper. Here you can see on the right, the rolled mural is taken through the auditorium doors, which, as you can see, would not have accommodated the dimensions of the stretched canvas. And then here we're preparing to load the mural. Actually, it's in this one where you can see the supports on the end of the tube, but we're preparing the van to load the mural in to take it to its next stop. The journey was in striking similarity to its original journey in May of 1926, when a newspaper article noted that the canvas would be rolled and transported by truck to the sesquicentennial exposition. And if the print is small for you, the last line of the caption reads, "The large canvas shown nearing completion will be rolled and shipped by motor truck to the Sesqui grounds." And here I will turn it over to Mark.
Thank you. So here we are in Westchester. The painting received conservation treatment in a secure, climate-controlled, rented facility in Westchester. A team of conservators worked on the painting for 6 months, flattening and stretching its canvas, removing grime from its paint surface, and inpainting losses to the paint film. The treatment was extensively documented with photography, written reports, and video. And here you can see the temporary work strainer that we made to hold the painting with fabric strips adhered to its edges. The work strainer could be hoisted up to the wall or laid down on the floor by means of pulleys and ropes. And that way we could have the painting stretched, at least temporarily, and be able to work on it flat or vertically. Think of it as kind of a trampoline system where those fabric strips are attached to a larger outer frame that is larger than the stretch painting will be by about a foot or so. And it makes it very maneuverable, and we could do what we needed to do, either face down or on the wall. For the flattening process, the painting was placed face down on a padded floor made of plywood that raised it off the cold concrete. Many applications of light moisture, followed by weighted blotters, flattened the distortions in the canvas. Holes were mended with strong tissue and a reversible adhesive. And you can see in the lower left of this slide, the largest piece of tissue is actually mending a large tear in the canvas. But you can see that whole row of little tiny tissue mends across the bottom of the screen. And those are, of course, the tack holes from the previous tacking when the painting was sort of truncated in size to fit into the Mont Alto stage. Insecure paint was consolidated, primarily at the edges of holes. When vertical, the cleaning process began, with conservators working on the floor and on a scaffold. Cotton swabs and a variety of aqueous cleaning materials were used. And you can see here it is being mounted to the wall vertically. It's on blocks on the right, and you can see the work strainer and the fabric edging that holds it in place. And here's the scaffold. You can see there's 2 stages on the scaffold so that conservators could work top or bottom of the painting and not get in each other's way. And you can see on the left, Joanne Barry and Mary McGinn starting to clean the painting. And on the slide on the right at the top center, you can see a little bit of stripes of dark and light where there's some areas where the grime is still in place, and then others where the cleaning has begun. A little bit closer up of the same areas on this slide. You can see it's really a huge difference in the cleaning. The painting was really quite grimy with sort of a dark gray, sooty grime. And it was a little bit tricky to remove from the paint. But when it did come off, the paint was really beautiful in color and generally pretty well preserved for a painting that had never been cleaned before. I think it probably had never received treatment before. So we were glad to see the color was in such good condition. And a couple details of the cleaning, of course, clean on the left on each one. After cleaning, it was apparent that some colors in the design, particularly the dark greens and blues of the trees, had become whitened and patchy. A very thin layer of low-gloss, non-yellowing synthetic resin varnish was applied overall to saturate the hazy paint film, making the paint film look closer to what it did when it was first applied. Our intent was to maintain an unvarnished look to the surface, while acknowledging that paint is more saturated, glossy, and deep in tone when new than it is decades later. The varnish also offers much protection to the paint film from scratches and accretions, and will make it easier to clean in the future. So you can see in this detail of same area, on the left, after varnishing at losses and mending of the holes, a synthetic putty is put in the areas of lost paint and textured, and then in painted, as you can see on the right. And any area where the inpainting is slightly matte is then retouched locally with varnish to make sure that it's an even sheen everywhere. So that way the texture and the sheen of all the inpainting matches the original paint as closely as possible. A few more details. This is, Barbara had mentioned earlier on the left, I think you can see that big flap tear in the lower left, and there's even a section of it where some fabric is missing, so there's a gap, and it filled and inpainted on the right. And of course, there was the whole series of smaller holes due to tacks of from when the painting had been folded around the stretcher, and those were filled and inpainted as well. The painting was then ready to be mounted to its new stretcher. So here it is face down with the new stretcher on its back. The stretcher was lightweight but sturdy, and its numerous cross members and expansion bolt joints allowed for local tensioning of the canvas. So you can see a detail of the expansion bolt on the right-hand side, and there are expansion bolts in each corner, and there's 4 on each horizontal side and 2 on each vertical side, and they allow for a lot of local tensioning. It's very difficult to get a painting this size evenly tensioned. It took me about 6 hours, I think, to stretch it. But it has remained flat for 30 years, so feel pretty good about that. It's really a well-designed stretcher. So now it was time to take the painting to Doylestown. A lightweight but sturdy crate or travel frame was made for the painting. The painting was secured to the travel frame and wrapped for transport. And you can see on the left, the painting, the travel frame is being built around the painting. So you have sort of a collar around it, and then you have battens over it that do not touch the painting, but they are going to support cardboard and plastic wrapping. It would have just been way too heavy for a 22 by 11 painting to have a plywood crate with a lot of lumber around it. And it wouldn't have fit in the truck if it had a large crate. So this was quite sturdy and worked well and remained relatively lightweight. And on the right, you can see that painting is in a vertical position, and working on it with scaffolds helps to keep it vertical and also allows the workers to put to wrap it and back it with cardboard. Here it is again on the left, same sort of view, and it's being wrapped in plastic with the battens keeping the plastic away from the painting surface on the right. And luckily, it was a nice day because we had to take it outside, of course, to fit into the truck. The painting had to be put into the truck at an angle, and because it was too tall for even a large tractor trailer van. And you can see the scaffold being used on the left-hand side of the truck opening, just because a couple people had to push it upward while it was being slid in, just to make sure that it went in very smoothly. The painting entered the museum through a very tall door, which if you look to the right of the installation now, you can see the door, and it went directly into the gallery where it would be displayed, which was very fortuitous. And here it is. The painting is on the gallery floor and ready to be lifted up. Here it is lifted up, and you can see the flanges of plywood around the outer edge that are attached to the stretcher, and those will be used with screws through them to attach the painting to the wall, adjusting it and leveling it before that's done. And they all go into a framework behind the painting. So crews position the painting on the wall, resting it on the support framing. And the flanges attached to the stretcher were used to mount the painting to the framing. And here it is being lifted from below, and people on either side on scaffolds screwing in the painting, in the flanges into the backing structure. And then someone in the center on a lift steadying the top edge of it. The painting's not extremely heavy, but it's enough that it's you really need multiple people to work on each edge of it while it's being handled. A wooden framework supports the drywalled enclosure. The framework does not directly touch the paint surface. A molding was then placed on the face of the drywall, appearing very much like the framing at the sesquicentennial. And the painting in this view shows how it anchors the gallery display, encouraging close viewing and contemplation. Barbara?
Thanks. So I put this slide together to show the mural throughout its life, installed in the 3 locations where it had been displayed. And it wasn't until I put these together that I realized how beautifully the current installation at the Michener complements that original display at the sesquicentennial. So the preservation of this mural depended on teamwork, which I keep repeating, but it's, with a project like this, it really does require unison and a shared commitment among the conservators, the art handlers, the preparators, and the Michener Museum staff, as well as the Mont Alto staff. And this shared commitment was not just focused upon preserving a single painting, but our joint efforts, as we know today, preserved a vivid piece of Pennsylvania's cultural and natural history. So there's many, many thanks. And thanks are due to the many participants whose expertise and collaboration ensured the success of this project. On a project of this scale, logistics become as essential as the conservation treatment itself. There are, and there were, many variables that can occur, and they require flexibility, clear communication, and a team capable of working together in unison. And we were fortunate to work with such a team. And it was a great team of conservators, art handlers, and Michener Museum staff, especially on those 2 intensive days that were required to document, deinstall, and prepare the mural for transport to Westchester. We were and are grateful for art handling by Henry Hose from the Michener Art Museum and by Glenn Heron from Masterpiece Express throughout the project, as well as assistance from the staff at Artex Art Services during the deinstallation. No small thanks, of course, also to director Bruce Katzeff, whose vision saw this project through to completion. And very special thanks to Assistant Director Judy Heyman, who coordinated the complex logistics with remarkable skill and calm throughout. During the treatment in Westchester, Mark and I were appreciative of the assistance by painting conservators Mary McGinn, Stefan Dedechuk, and Joanne Barry. And thank you. Yes, of course. Thank you for pointing this out. Mark reminded me that the funding for the entire project, many generous donors, but also a legislative initiative grant that was awarded by the Pennsylvania State Senator H. Craig Lewis. So thank you again. And we are happy. We ended on this beautiful detail. We are happy to answer any questions that you all might have. So we heard during the panel discussion that Bruce Katzeff admitted that he had one of the masonry nails, and we will admit too we have a souvenir from the project. There would have been 6 in total.
Yeah. And I can't even remember how we pulled these out. These are just so huge.
It was like, that was a lot of the discussion in the beginning.
Yeah.
When we got there, just figuring out how to safely remove those guys.
Because they went right through the stretcher, the painting, and you had to carefully pry them. So
we will also say, I think you've posted it on the Michener Art YouTube, but the program Artbeat shows in more detail, because we were in the midst of moving and doing the work. It was really nice to have the videographers there that were documenting the project for the local television program at the time, Artbeat. So we do encourage you to take a look at that if you're interested.
In the slides, we received many slides from Laura and the Michener, and we also had a set of those slides. But we were thinking about who took those slides, and then we thought, well, of course we didn't do it because we were the subject of the slides. So it was nice that there was so much documentation going on at the time that we didn't have to do because we had our hands full.
I want to thank you both. Thank you, Barbara and Mark, for that presentation. And I think there's some masonry nails hanging around the director's office too at the Michener. I've definitely seen those before. So apparently it's like, but those nails kind of people collected them.
Right.
Yeah. I have a question. Is this one mural one of the largest pieces you've worked on? Have you worked on a larger artwork before?
We worked on an NC Wyeth mural that is now in Chad's Ford, and that was 61 by 19 feet. And then I worked on another one. Barbara and I both worked on that. And then there was one at St. Andrew's School, another Wyeth mural that went around one wall of their dining hall. So that was probably about 35 feet, something like that. But it is probably I think it's the largest painting we've ever worked on, which was removable rather than something mounted to a wall. Yeah, it's pretty big.
Yeah. Of course, in my work at the Barnes Foundation, there was the dance mural, which is an interesting because it is on a shaped canvas rather than here Garber painted it on a rectangular canvas, but painted the design. And we were remarking earlier about where he even sourced the canvas.
Yeah, because it's a single piece, and it probably would have been a 12-foot piece of canvas, and it really would have just ruined the effect of space if it had to be seamed in the middle, because you always see the seam, like you see a lot of big mural paintings where there is a puckered seam across the center of it horizontally. So, and it was good quality linen, not super heavyweight, but the fact that it's held up without being lined onto another canvas for 100 years. And it stayed flat is pretty amazing.
Thank you. Jen, do you want me to ask the questions in the Q&A, or do you want to do that?
I can do it if you want.
Sure.
Sonia asked, how regularly does the painting get cleaned since this major effort?
So we have not cleaned the painting, but I'm sure that the Michener Museum staff must dust it periodically, although I haven't asked the question, but I'm sure they must. Yeah.
Yeah, we I think for many of the works in our collection, we keep an eye on them, and they're it's in a more controlled environment, which is different than an auditorium where we keep people away from the paintings, where there's no smoking in the museum.
No putting out of the
But we do like periodic dusting of work, as you said, but nothing. There hasn't been a need for such a major effort again since it's been installed, which is
that's all we should need for the long term, is just dusting with a soft brush to just loose accumulation of dust rather than the really dense accumulation that was on it from being in the auditorium all those years.
Which, as Laura pointed out, the Michener is a controlled environment where the facilities folks will maintain the HVAC system to
it's in a much better place now, for its longevity,
and we treasure it very much.
Okay, Sonia had another question. She said, I've often heard that saliva is one of the best things to use in restoration work. Given the scale of effort needed here, what type of solution did you use instead?
So she has learned one of our tricks. Saliva does work well. A trick learned from every mother who wipes their child's face. It is not what we used, but there are approximate solutions that aqueous solutions that we can make that approximate that enzymatic quality of our spit.
Yeah. The reason it works is because there's an enzyme amylase in it, which for some reason it really dissolves a slightly greasy grime easily and safely. But we have other solutions that where we adjust the pH and a couple chemicals that are in distilled water matrix, and that's mostly what we use to clean it. And then it's all followed by distilled water rinse to get anything off that might, any residual material.
Okay. Lorraine wants to know, how did the painting get to the school?
Unless Laura knows the answer to that, we don't. It was, I'm not sure how much documentation there was.
There is a little bit, and I'm sorry I should have pulled up my notes prior to this conversation too. But essentially, so Mont Alto, which was at the time when the Michener acquired the painting, was part of Penn State. It was a Penn State campus, but before that, it had a long history as a forestry school, and it was believed, of course, when the mural was displayed at the sesquicentennial, it was meant to represent basically the natural resources of Pennsylvania. It was displayed in the Pennsylvania building, not the Fine Arts building. So it was almost like a form of state propaganda in a way, which it's kind of fun to think about it that way. Which is why, Garber hasn't included any human structures or people. It's the landscape, it's the trees. There's a hint at this rocky landscape of like quarries, for example. One of Pennsylvania's past governors, Francois Pinchot, had a background in forestry and was involved with the Mont Alto Forestry School, I believe. And that because of that kind of like paved the way for the painting to go there after the sesquicentennial.
Yeah, that makes sense. Was Garber there when it was installed?
That's a great question, and I don't know. I don't know if we have documentation about that.
Because I was just thinking it must have just broken his heart to see those edges get truncated if he was at the installation.
Yeah. I don't know if we have documentation about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good question.
Okay, there's a question from Jay. He wanted to know, could you talk about the color palette Garber used? And did you have any trouble matching the colors?
No, I'll let you.
Yeah. We didn't do any pigment analysis. So this is just visual, from being a painter and from being used to what tube paint looks like and how it dries and all that, to what tone and color it is. And also a little bit because some of the colors had whitened in a way that is characteristic of certain pigments. So I would say that because of the whitening, there was probably viridian green. I think there was ultramarine. Some of the green has, some of the blue has a slightly greenish cast, so that would have been cerulean. By 1926, he could have been either using one of three different whites. White lead was a traditional color. It was starting to pass out of use, and zinc white was known to be safer. Titanium white was available from about 1916 on, so he could have been using that too. And then I always think that there's quite a variety of earth colors, but I always associate Garber with a lot of burnt sienna. I think there's a very strong orange brown. And then, but there would have been also, raw umber and burnt umber and raw sienna, yellow ochre. And then probably for his brighter colors, he might have had, I'm looking at the deer here. I would think cadmium yellow or chromium yellow, something like that, or cadmium red was available since about 1910. People might still have been using vermilion, that kind of fire engine red color. And also for the greens you see along the bottom edge, in addition to viridian, I'll bet some of that is chromium oxide green. So that's probably more than you needed to know.
But also, as Mark said in the beginning, we didn't analyze the pigments. This is just from visual assessment. The canvas was grounded. It was a white ground. And one of the things that I remember is that the paint, and it probably makes sense since it was such a large scale project for him, the paint was applied pretty thinly
Yeah,
for,
it was.
yeah.
But it's funny, it wasn't applied in the way that some mural painters do, where it's just so sparing that the paint doesn't have any real integrity to it. It was thinly applied, but also just very assuredly applied. And I'm sure he changed some things, but we didn't notice any big thick ridges of paint that would indicate a lower form or deer being moved around or whole trees being moved around. It really was just confidently painted and conceived, and just beautiful brushwork, and sparing, not sparing use of paint, but economical way of painting, which I think I'm just astonished that he did this in such a short period of time on such a large scale. He must have just been so inspired.
I think I remember reading that there are no studies extant for the mural, but there is one reference in a letter he sent. So he might have worked out the composition in a study before
Okay.
making the mural, which is the first mural Garber and only mural really that Garber ever painted.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just want to correct what I said because I did just pull up my notes really quick. The Pennsylvania governor was Gifford Pinchot. I added a Francois to the Pinchot, which is
Yeah.
incorrect, but he was involved with the Forestry School at Mont Alto, which
Yeah.
is how that painting ended up there.
Hmm.
I had a question, Barbara and Mark. What size areas do you clean at a time? Is it like 1 foot by 1
Oh.
foot? Is it inches by inches? What do you do?
It's usually, I guess we're all slightly different, but we're using small swabs, a little bit on a mural like this because it was cleaning fairly easily. They were larger than a Q-tip size swab, but they weren't large. And we do go small areas at a time because we're constantly, even though it's water-based cleaning, sometimes early 20th century paint can be very sensitive to water. So we are cleaning very slowly, carefully, constantly looking at the swabs in the paint to make sure that everything is working okay. The other thing on a mural, when there's more than one person working on it, is that we all need to be checking each other's work so that we're working sort of so that we're both all cleaning to the same degree
Yeah.
on this to keep the painting surface even.
But I think you start out with very small areas. You do a test the size of a postage stamp or smaller, and then you don't want to get ahead of yourself by cleaning too big of an area because it gets streaky. So you have to make sure that it's even, and probably to get something even, I would think like a 6 by 6 inch size would be big for cleaning. Sometimes you reduce the grime or varnish in stages, but if you're thoroughly cleaning down as close to the paint as safely possible, you don't do a really big area at any one time, or else you'll just end up with streaky mess.
And then even to step back further, as Mark was mentioning with the testing, we would have first tested all the different colors and different areas of the painting to make sure it was all cleaning with the solutions that we had worked out. And then you probably remembered in some of those partially cleaned images, as we're cleaning, we kind of keep the edges feathered. You don't want to make a very harsh line because that can sometimes the cleaning agent might poultice is the word I'm looking for, might poultice an area too far.
Yeah. And you have to keep it all even. If there's some areas that can't be cleaned as far because they're sensitive as an adjacent area, you have to balance it as you clean it. So often a painting is not cleaned absolutely the same degree across every single section of the painting. A more traditional earlier painting that maybe has a brown background or something, you might leave more varnish in the dark area where you can't really see it, as opposed to highlight where you might take more off.
Okay, we have one more question. Sonia wants to know, what is the most difficult substance you have ever removed from a painting?
Polyurethane,
Mhm.
which begs the question, why would anyone put polyurethane on a painting? And the most difficult one I had was a portrait of Lincoln, which is now in the Smithsonian, and it had been in a building in Madison, New Jersey, and it's this full length, 7 foot tall painting of Lincoln, 9 foot tall painting of Lincoln, and some custodian decided to varnish it in its frame with undiluted polyurethane over the whole surface, and the only way to get it off was solvents wouldn't touch it without damaging the paint. So I had to peel it off like sheets of wax paper, peeling it off. And I had rented a space with another conservator who was much younger, and I told her over and over again, don't get the idea that this is how I clean paintings all the time. This is a one-off thing. But yeah, that's the most difficult. Resins that shouldn't be on, that aren't artist materials and shouldn't be on the painting, that are mistakenly put on. That's the hardest thing for me to remove, that type of thing.
But one of the things that we were talking about amongst ourselves earlier too is that sometimes an unvarnished painting that is very grimy, removing that grime from an unvarnished paint surface can be even more challenging than removing a varnish layer, because the grime gets embedded into the pores almost of the paint layer.
And we were really grateful with this one that it wasn't the case that the painting was flaking. But one thing that's really difficult to clean is early 20th century paintings where the ground materials aren't that strong. And so you're trying to remove grime from a painting that is flaking. So you have to consolidate the paint and clean at the same time, or alternating back and forth between consolidated and cleaning. That's extremely difficult. So yeah.
Well, I'm glad it wasn't flaking.
No, yeah.
No, it was actually a really, really good.
It seems like there was more than enough to tackle.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's a lot of square feet, right? But but the only place it was insecure at all is right at the edges of the tears, where you would expect the paint needed just a little bit of adhesion.
Yeah. When we had our conversation about the mural, gosh, a couple months ago now, that's also available on YouTube with Bruce Katzif and Dana Garber and Corinne Caldwell. But Corinne was saying how I think alluded to the fact that because they covered it, I guess, for maybe the last few decades or something of its life, it helped preserve it a little bit too. Like they did take some steps to protect the surface of the painting.
Yeah. And lucky it was far back enough. It was a pretty deep stage, so having it far back enough, you wouldn't really have to bump into it if you were speaking at the front of the stage. But still, yeah, a mop handle could easily go through it.
Yeah. Well, I don't. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Jen. Oh, did a question just come in?
So are some artists using paints that may not be as strong and maybe last as long?
Mm-hmm.
In this period?
I guess in that period.
Well, yeah, I think so. And certainly now, well, paint, a lot of paint is tested now. Okay, a lot of paint is tested now for fading, and you can buy pigments that don't fade so much.
And they're rated.
And they're rated, yeah, and you get what you pay for when you buy. The ones that are well rated cost more than the ones that are made from dyes, say, and that might fade.
And they also rate the whether it will fade or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I found more and more as a painter myself is that especially for lighter colors, a lot of them aren't ground for oil paints. They're not ground in pure linseed oil anymore. They use safflower oil, which doesn't yellow as much, but that makes a softer paint film. So I actually think, I don't know how you feel, but I think a painter painting now, their paint will not be as hard in 50 years as a painter painting in 1900s paint would be, at the same. I think it's sort of softer
And
paint.
even the difference because white lead is no longer available.
Yeah. White lead, of course, yellowed and did crack, but it was hard as linoleum when it dried, because it's the only pigment that actually chemically combines with the oil, and it forms kind of linoleum. And the titanium white doesn't yellow as much, and zinc white doesn't yellow as much, but they're way more brittle. So yeah, the materials, some are better and some aren't as good, I think, as ones from 100 years ago. They're less toxic, that's for sure. I mean, you think people used to use paint full of lead and arsenic. That was not great. Late 19th century and early 20th. So better for us to use, I suppose.
Better for the artists now, but
Better for the artists. Longer lived artists.
Yes. So maybe they can create more.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much,
Thank you.
Mark and Barbara. This was fascinating. And thank you, Laura, and thank you all for attending. We do have a couple other virtual programs coming up. You can get more information on our website, but on June 16th, Abby Lua will be talking about her new exhibit, BJO Nordfelt, which will be opening this weekend. And on July 21st, we will be having an author talk that will be corresponding with our new exhibit, The Crossing, which will open at the end of June. So thank you, everyone. And I think the storm is now running into Doylestown.
Yeah, we're done. We're done here.
Yeah.
It's
You're
very
done.
threatening here too. So I don't know if it's rained yet, but looks like it could.
At least we're all home. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Excellent. Well,
Thank you so much, Barbara and
everyone.
Mark.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
It was
Nice
fun.
to see you both.
Great
Good
to
to see
see
you.
you. Right.
Good night.
Take care.
Night.
Bye.